The Draconian Empire had never lost a war. In 1,000 years of conquest, they had reduced entire civilizations to rubble, enslaved entire star systems, and rewritten the maps of the galaxy in their own image. Ruthless, calculating, and utterly dominant, they saw themselves as the ultimate force in the universe. So when their fleet entered Earth's solar system, there was no question of if humanity would fall, only how quickly. The attack was swift and brutal. Without warning, over 100 Draconian warships materialized in Earth's orbit. Their arrival was met with global panic. Humanity's defenses, while formidable against internal threats, were nothing compared to the technology of a race that had perfected planetary conquest over millennia. The Draconians did not come to negotiate. They didn't demand surrender. They simply acted, launching massive energy pulses into Earth's upper atmosphere, disrupting communication networks, neutralizing satellites, and plunging entire nations into chaos. Then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, they vanished. Not a single Draconian warship remained in orbit. No escape pods. No wreckage. No transmission signals. Nothing. One moment, they were an unstoppable force preparing to subjugate humanity. The next, they were gone, erased as if they had never existed. At first, the world held its breath, waiting for the next attack. The leaders of every nation scrambled to make sense of what had happened. Had some unknown alien force intervened? Had the Draconians suffered a catastrophic failure? Hours passed. Then days. The silence was deafening. The galaxy watched in stunned confusion. Other civilizations, having once feared the Draconians, waited for an explanation. Empires that had suffered under their rule saw this as an impossibility. The Draconians did not disappear. They conquered, they enslaved, they destroyed. But they did not vanish. And yet, they were gone. The question that now haunted the universe was simple: what did the humans do? And why weren't they talking? It was only after the Draconian fleet vanished that humanity began to comprehend the enormity of what had happened. The world was in shock, but in the silence of that confusion, something began to stir. For the first time in history, humanity was faced with an unprecedented opportunity. The greatest threat they had ever encountered, one that had the power to destroy them in an instant, had just disappeared. But instead of celebrating or letting their guard down, something more profound began to unfold. The world leaders were in denial. Most of Earth's governments were stuck in analysis paralysis. No one had expected such an event. The military theorists began to discuss possible strategies for a counterattack, wondering if they could somehow find the missing Draconian fleet. But, for every theory they discussed, there was a growing sense that their response wasn't what truly mattered. Something far more fundamental was at play, and they were missing it. Meanwhile, a quiet realization was taking root among the people. Across the globe, from the crowded streets of New York City to the sleepy towns in the Scottish Highlands, a sense of unity began to grow. For centuries, humanity had fought among itself. Wars, borders, ideologies, and politics had divided the world. Yet now, in the wake of the Draconian fleet's disappearance, something had changed. People began to see each other not as rivals, but as allies. Humanity had been given a second chance, and the moment of reckoning would not pass them by. One city, Paris, was one of the first to feel this awakening. There, in the heart of Europe, a group of scientists, engineers, and philosophers gathered under the banner of an idea they would later call the human renaissance. They would be the ones to build the path forward, and they would not wait for another invasion to define their future. The thinking was simple: the Draconians had come. They had struck with the force of 1,000 suns, and yet they had vanished. There had to be more to their disappearance than simple luck or fate. What if, just what if, humanity wasn't just an incidental part of the galaxy? What if the Draconians had feared them? What if Earth was not just another insignificant planet in the universe, but but the most significant one of all. The first major breakthrough came from a scientist named Dr. Ilara Connors, a physicist who had been studying spacetime anomalies for years. She made an unexpected connection between the Draconians' disappearance and some unusual gravitational fluctuations that had been detected during their invasion. The Draconians, with their superior technology, had no reason to fear anything, yet they had vanished without a trace. But there was one lingering detail that intrigued Dr. Connors: the fleet had not simply left, they had folded space around them. She theorized that something about Earth, perhaps its unique place in the galaxy, had disrupted the Draconian fleet's advanced technology, making it impossible for them to continue their assault. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a failure. The Draconians had left because they had no choice. What if humanity, through sheer force of will and the very nature of their planet, had unknowingly triggered this event? As the days passed, more and more nations began to support Dr. Connors' theory. The idea that humanity wasn't just a primitive species but had somehow triggered the Draconian retreat spread like wildfire. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it an unfounded belief, it was the undeniable fact that no one had seen it coming. Humanity had not only survived but somehow repelled a force far greater than themselves. And for the first time, the people of Earth began to believe that they were not just survivors. They were fighters. But while the world was grappling with this new reality, an even more unexpected twist was unfolding. A signal. A faint, distorted transmission had been detected in the deep recesses of space, hidden within the cosmic background radiation. It was ancient, older than anything humanity had ever received, but what mattered most was this: it was a message. And it was unmistakably human. The transmission was a piece of history, a remnant of Earth's past, a signal that had been sent from Earth itself, but not from the present day. It was from a time centuries before. But the question was, who had sent it? The discovery of the mysterious transmission left humanity in a state of awe and confusion. It was clear that the signal was not a random anomaly. It was deliberate, purposeful, and undeniably human. But the question that plagued scientists and governments alike was, how could a message from Earth's past have traveled through space and time? The signal had been received deep within the cosmos, buried within the static of space-time itself. It had bypassed conventional methods of communication, traveling in a way that defied all understanding of physics. The transmission was old, its content fragmented, but there was no mistaking the unmistakable signature of Earth. Dr. Ilara Connors, the brilliant physicist who had uncovered the anomaly in the first place, was once again thrust into the spotlight. Her theory about the Draconians' retreat now seemed even more plausible in light of the signal. But as she and her team analyzed the transmission, one thing became clear: the message was not just a beacon. It was a warning. The fragments of the signal slowly came together, revealing words, phrases, and odd symbols that, when decoded, pointed to one chilling conclusion. Earth had once faced a galactic enemy far more dangerous than the Draconians, a species of untold power that had nearly wiped out humanity millennia ago. The warning spoke of an ancient, intergalactic conflict. It was clear that this wasn't the first time Earth had been under threat. There were mentions of the Void Walkers, a race so powerful that they could control entire star systems with a thought. This was the same threat that had caused the first humans to flee Earth. The very reason they had sent this message across time and space was because they knew humanity would be tested once again. The Void Walkers were coming. This message from the past wasn't just a warning about the Draconian fleet, it was a call to action. It was a plea from Earth's ancient inhabitants for the future to remember the cost of their survival and to prepare for the greatest challenge they would ever face. The first war with the Void Walkers had been devastating. Only a handful of survivors had managed to escape, hiding in the far reaches of the galaxy. The transmission, however, didn't just speak of doom and destruction. It also contained something else, an ancient technology. Buried deep within the signal was a blueprint, a sequence of coordinates, and instructions for building a device that could perhaps be the key to defeating the Voidwalkers once and for all. This revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community. If the signal was real, if this technology could be replicated, humanity would not only survive, it would be able to fight back. The problem was, the technology contained in the transmission was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was advanced, more sophisticated than even the Draconian fleet's weapons, and it was shrouded in a complexity that baffled even the brightest minds on Earth. It was clear that this was no ordinary invention, it was the last defense humanity had. Meanwhile, the political world was in chaos. Some leaders pushed for immediate action, eager to uncover the secrets of the transmission. Others, however, were skeptical. Could the message be a hoax? Could it be a trap set by the Draconians themselves, seeking to lure humanity into a false sense of security? As the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the message was not a mistake or an elaborate ruse. It was a legacy left by humanity's ancient ancestors, a crucial part of Earth's history that had been hidden for millennia. The question now was how to access the device's technology, and more importantly, how to awaken the dormant power that lay within humanity itself. Across the world, a sense of unity began to take shape. This wasn't just the Earth's battle anymore, it was humanity's battle. There were no longer divisions between nations or races. The Draconian fleet had vanished, but something far darker loomed on the horizon. Humanity had no choice but to prepare for the battle that was coming. Dr. Connors, along with a diverse team of engineers, scientists, and scholars, began to work tirelessly, attempting to decode the ancient blueprint. It became clear that they weren't just building a weapon, they were uncovering humanity's true potential. The device was more than just a tool of war. It was a key to unlocking a hidden power that had been dormant within Earth for centuries. But as they delved deeper into the mystery of the signal, strange things began to happen. The planet itself began to respond. Earth's magnetic fields shifted, strange energy pulses emanated from the core of the planet, and in some places, the skies lit up with unprecedented light shows. It was as though the very fabric of reality was reacting to the message. The Earth wasn't just a battleground, it was alive, and it was awakening. In the quiet corners of the world, people began to notice something even stranger. Humans, who had long been dismissed as primitive, were suddenly doing the impossible. A street artist in Tokyo painted a mural that seemed to come to life, a farmer in Nebraska grew crops in barren soil, and an engineer in Berlin solved complex equations in a matter of hours. There was an undeniable shift taking place. Humanity, it seemed, was evolving at an exponential rate. The more the device's blueprint was decoded, the more humanity unlocked its own potential. But with that potential came a new fear. The Voidwalkers were still out there, and if they were coming, Earth needed to be ready. The final question was no longer about the technology, it was about what humanity was truly capable of. Would the power of Earth's ancient message be enough to save them? Or would the Voidwalkers prove to be an insurmountable force that no technology, no matter how advanced, could overcome? As the weeks went by, Earth's frantic race to decipher the ancient message intensified. The transmission had been decoded, and the device was being constructed piece by piece, yet something darker lingered in the back of everyone's mind. The Voidwalkers, a race that had once nearly annihilated humanity, had remained silent for far too long. But deep in the vastness of space, their silence was not peace, it was a harbinger. Dr. Ilara Connors, who had led the scientific effort, felt an unsettling shift. The planet's magnetic fields were becoming unstable, and despite their best efforts to analyze the anomaly, there was no explanation. It was as if Earth itself was on edge, anticipating something terrible. And then it happened. A deep, low hum rippled through the Earth's crust, vibrating through every city, every town, every home. For a moment, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath, but then the skies above lit up with streaks of ominous, glowing light. Across the world, people looked up in awe and terror, this was no meteor shower. This was no ordinary cosmic event. Humanity's collective consciousness seemed to shift as the mysterious lights in the sky intensified. Scientists, politicians, and leaders scrambled for answers, but no one could pinpoint the source. It was clear, however, that this wasn't some random celestial occurrence. The Void Walkers were coming. They had been lying in wait, and now they were making their move. News spread like wildfire. The first signs of the Void Walkers had been detected in a distant galaxy, but they weren't the only ones headed toward Earth. The strange lights in the sky were only the precursor to the imminent arrival of a massive fleet. The Void Walkers had mobilized, and they were bringing their full strength to bear. Meanwhile, Dr. Connors and her team worked tirelessly to unlock the final components of the device. It was humanity's last hope, yet it was clear that they were still too far from completing it. Time was running out. The Void Walkers, a species beyond comprehension. The Void Walkers were no ordinary species, they were beings of pure energy, existing in multiple dimensions at once. To describe them in physical terms was nearly impossible, as their forms constantly shifted between states of matter and energy. Their power was limitless, able to manipulate gravity, time, and space itself. The humans who had first encountered them had barely survived, fleeing into the far reaches of the galaxy, leaving only the barest trace of their existence behind. The reason the Void Walkers had vanished from history was simple: they had been waiting. Their species, ancient beyond reckoning, had observed the evolution of humanity with both fascination and contempt. But they had been patient, knowing that one day, when humanity's defenses were at their weakest, they would return to finish what they had started. As the fleet drew closer, humanity's fear was palpable. The Draconians had been formidable, but the Void Walkers were something entirely different. The Draconian fleet, once considered the galaxy's mightiest, had disappeared into thin air, retreating from an unseen foe. They knew better than to challenge the Void Walkers. It was said that those who had tried to fight the Void Walkers were erased from existence, their very souls obliterated by an overwhelming force. Earth's leaders, sensing the gravity of the situation, called an emergency meeting of the world's most powerful nations. They knew that if humanity was to survive this coming invasion, they would need to unite as never before. For years, there had been divisions, national borders, cultural differences, and political strife. But in this moment, everything changed. The Void Walkers were not just an enemy of one nation or another, they were a threat to all of humanity. For the first time in history, the world's governments came together in solidarity. The message from the past had been the spark of unity, and now, standing on the precipice of total annihilation, humanity had no choice but to rise above its divisions. Military forces from every corner of the globe worked together, pooling their resources and knowledge. Yet, despite their best efforts, Earth had no military force capable of even slowing the Void Walkers down. Their weapons were beyond anything humanity could fathom. The newly constructed device, though powerful, was still untested, and humanity's time was running out. With each passing day, the Void Walker fleet grew closer, their presence casting a dark shadow over the world. There was no escaping it, Earth was about to face its greatest test. The unseen power awakens. While governments and military leaders strategized, something remarkable began to happen on Earth. It wasn't just technology or weapons that were being brought to bear against the Void Walkers, it was the collective will of humanity. The more the population became aware of the coming threat, the more humanity's latent potential seemed to awaken. Ordinary people, farmers, engineers, teachers, and doctors, began to exhibit extraordinary feats. Some could lift heavier loads with ease, others could focus their minds with unprecedented clarity, and a select few began to access hidden talents they never knew they possessed. This wasn't just a collective unity, it was a physical and spiritual awakening. Across the world, people felt a strange, deep connection. They weren't just human, they were one, an unstoppable force united by purpose, love, and determination. The technology to fight the Void Walkers might have been incomplete, but humanity's true strength was something far beyond anything the Void Walkers had anticipated. Dr. Connors, observing this shift, began to realize the truth. The device wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to unlocking something far greater, the potential of humanity itself. They had not only inherited the technology from their ancestors, they had inherited their strength, their resilience, their unwavering will to survive. But the question remained, would it be enough? As the first Voidwalker ship entered Earth's orbit, humanity's fate hung in the balance. The device was ready, but the battle would not be won with technology alone. It would be won with the sheer power of human will. And so, the stage was set. The battle for Earth had begun, and it was a fight not just for survival, but for the very soul of humanity itself. The day the Voidwalkers arrived, everything changed. Their ships did not descend with the usual fireworks of a space invasion, no bombs, no laser beams. The atmosphere around them seemed to ripple with an unnatural stillness, as though the very laws of physics had bent in their wake. The air itself felt heavy, oppressive. People across the world could feel it. The sky had grown darker, more ominous. The first ship, a massive, incomprehensible structure of shifting, iridescent material, hovered above Earth, as if studying its inhabitants. It was then that humanity truly understood the scale of the threat they faced. Across every news network, across every phone and tablet, a chilling broadcast interrupted all communication. A singular, ethereal voice echoed in every language, its tone calm, detached, and yet filled with unimaginable power. It was the voice of the Voidwalkers. And it said only one thing. We have come for your world. Your existence ends here. The reaction on Earth was immediate and terrifying. People panicked, rushing for shelters, some fleeing cities in chaotic desperation, while others stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. It was clear that humanity was outclassed. The sheer scale of the Voidwalkers' power seemed unmatchable. Governments scrambled to make sense of the threat. Leaders sent messages of defiance, but deep down, they knew that resistance was futile. The Voidwalkers had wiped out entire civilizations with a mere thought. They had no need for weapons, they were the weapon. But amid the panic, there was a glimmer of hope. The device, the mysterious technology that had been assembled by Dr. Ilara Connors and her team, was completed. The world's greatest minds had worked tirelessly, believing it to be the key to humanity's survival. But there was a growing realization that this device was not just a weapon, it was a bridge. A bridge to something far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. And with that knowledge, Dr. Connors understood that it was time to unlock it. The awakening power of unity. In the quiet moments before the device's activation, something incredible began to unfold. A new wave of human resilience swept through the planet. People who had felt insignificant, powerless against the Voidwalkers, began to experience the shift in their own abilities. The latent energy that had been building in humanity's collective consciousness surged with full force, creating a tidal wave of psychic and physical potential. No longer was humanity just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a chance to prove that they belonged among the stars, that their story wasn't meant to end here. It began with small miracles, a woman, paralyzed from the waist down, standing and walking for the first time in years, a child, once terrified of the dark, now casting an unyielding light from his fingertips. People felt it, humanity had tapped into something ancient and unfathomable. What had been thought of as nothing more than myth or legend was now a reality. They were no longer mere survivors, they were evolving. Dr. Connors and her team, huddled around the device, realized that the shift was not just an isolated event. The device was amplifying humanity's awakening, tapping into the energy that flowed through every living being on Earth. It wasn't the technology itself that would defeat the Voidwalkers, it was the awakening of humanity's potential, the unyielding force of will and unity that had always been the true strength of the human race. The device had unlocked that dormant energy, and now, with it, they could fight back. The first strike. As the Voidwalker fleet moved closer, the world braced for impact. The first wave of attacks from their ships was nothing short of catastrophic. A single ship fired a beam of energy that tore through the atmosphere like a knife through butter, leveling entire cities. The survivors fled in fear, watching as the cities they knew and loved were reduced to rubble. But as the second wave approached, something extraordinary happened. Humanity, unified and determined, gathered all their newly awakened power. Across the globe, people, ordinary people, stood together, channeling their newfound abilities into a single, focused effort. They called out to the sky, willing the energy of the earth itself to rise against the invaders. They tapped into the deepest core of their existence, where human determination, love, and courage intertwined. And in that moment, the unimaginable occurred. A massive, glowing energy field enveloped the planet, pulsing with an intensity that sent shockwaves through the Voidwalker fleet. The alien ships hesitated, their movement slowing, as if the force of humanity's combined will was something they could not comprehend. Dr. Connors, watching from her command center, could hardly believe what she was seeing. The energy field was not just a defensive shield. It was an active force, a wave of power that surged outward, pushing back against the Voidwalkers with an unseen strength. The first Voidwalker ship faltered, its outer hull glowing a bright red, before it shifted, torn apart by the very energy it had tried to dominate. The ship vanished, disintegrating into nothingness. And with that, the first blow had been struck. It was humanity's signal to the Voidwalkers that they were not the helpless prey they once appeared to be. The counterattack begins. The remaining Voidwalker fleet began to retreat, but they were not deterred. This was merely the beginning of their assault. They had been stunned by humanity's unexpected power, but their arrogance remained. Earth, they thought, was still no match for them. Yet they had underestimated one thing: humanity's unyielding will to survive. What followed was a battle unlike any seen before. The human forces, bolstered by their newfound abilities, coordinated an attack on the Voidwalker fleet. The energy field expanded, creating powerful shockwaves that rippled through the Voidwalkers' ships, tearing apart their defenses. Humanity was no longer defending, they were striking back. It wasn't just advanced technology or weapons that won the day, it was the heart of humanity, the strength of those who had risen to the challenge, who fought not for power, but for survival, for hope, for the future. And as the final remnants of the Voidwalker fleet flickered in the distance, humanity knew that they had done the impossible. They had defeated a foe that had once seemed invincible. And in doing so, they had proven that the true power of the human race was not in their weapons, but in their hearts. The earth stood in stunned silence. The battle had been won, but it was a victory that came at a heavy price. The cities that had once stood as symbols of human achievement now lay in ruins, decimated by the Voidwalkers' overwhelming assault. For a time, the world mourned the devastation, the lives lost in the struggle. But humanity's victory, against all odds, had shaken the very core of the galaxy. Dr. Ilara Connors stood before the makeshift council, her face pale but her eyes burning with a fire that had not dimmed since the day the Voidwalkers first arrived. Humanity had shown its strength, its resilience, but now there was something more pressing to consider: what would come next? The Voidwalkers had retreated, but their retreat was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a far greater conflict, one that threatened not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. The repercussions of victory. The next few days were a whirlwind of negotiations, reconstructions, and alliances. The world's leaders, once divided by borders and politics, now united under a common banner: the survival of the human race. They were no longer mere nations fighting for power or resources. They were a global force, determined to rebuild and, more importantly, prepare for the next wave of threats that would inevitably follow the Voidwalkers. But with victory came a difficult truth: humanity had been forever changed. No one could deny the power they now wielded. The energy they had tapped into was something beyond comprehension, something ancient and primal. Some viewed it as a blessing, others as a curse. It was not just a power to protect themselves, but a power that could potentially be harnessed to reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. And therein lay the danger. There were whispers, murmurs in the corridors of power, of the human agenda, becoming a new force to rival the greatest civilizations of the galaxy. The technology that Dr. Connors and her team had unlocked was far more than a weapon. It was a new path, a new era. But it was also a potential catalyst for further destruction. The galaxy would not forgive the rise of such a force lightly. And then, the unthinkable happened. A message from the unknown. Just days after the first celebrations of victory, the world received another broadcast. This time, it was not from the Void Walkers. It came from an unknown source, a distant signal that had somehow breached every defense Earth had put in place. The message was cryptic, brief, and terrifying. We have watched your victory. But do not mistake it for a triumph. You are not alone in the universe. You are being watched. And your time is coming to an end. The message faded as suddenly as it appeared, leaving the world in a state of shock and confusion. Who was this new enemy? What did they want from humanity? Was this some remnants of the Voidwalker Empire, or something entirely new? The coming storm. As the message echoed in the minds of every human who had heard it, a new sense of urgency gripped the planet. Dr. Connors and the Global Council quickly began preparations, trying to decode the warning and make sense of what it meant for humanity's future. They knew the Voidwalkers were just the beginning. They had seen the ripple of energy humanity had unleashed. If this mysterious entity had noticed their rise, it was only a matter of time before they too would arrive at Earth's doorstep. But something had changed in humanity. Something profound. The power they now wielded was no longer something they feared, it was something they embraced. In every corner of the globe, humans were harnessing their newfound abilities with a single purpose: to protect their world. People had learned to control the energy that flowed through them. Some had become able to manipulate the very elements, while others could move objects with their minds, even heal the wounded with a touch. The true strength of humanity had been unlocked, and now it was a force to be reckoned with. The days of weakness and fear were over. As Earth prepared for whatever was to come, a new wave of courage and unity surged across the world. They would not go down without a fight. They would meet whatever threat arrived with the same strength that had brought them through the Voidwalkers' assault. But not everyone agreed with this newfound power. There were factions within the human race that feared what this energy could mean: an uncontrollable force, one that could tear the very fabric of society apart. And as humanity united in preparation for the coming storm, a shadow began to rise within their own ranks. Those who had once fought for unity now found themselves divided. Some wanted to protect the peace they had fought for, while others saw this new power as a means to expand their influence, even dominate the galaxy. The human race, despite its unity, was about to face its most dangerous enemy, itself. An inward struggle. In the midst of this growing tension, Dr. Connors gathered her team in a secure location. She stared at the blueprints of the device, the energy readings that hummed from the monitors, and the faces of those around her. They had unlocked a power greater than anything they had ever imagined, but she could feel the weight of it pressing on her. "Do you think we can control it?" one of her colleagues asked, voice heavy with doubt. "I don't know," Dr. Connors replied, her gaze fixed on the swirling patterns on the monitor. "But we have no choice now. The galaxy is watching us, and whatever comes next, we will be ready." And as she spoke those words, a sense of calm settled over her. She knew what humanity was capable of, what they were meant to become. But she also knew that this power, this gift, was not something to be wielded lightly. It was up to them to show the galaxy that they could be more than just survivors, they could be protectors, keepers of peace. They could change the future. The ultimate decision. Outside the secure facility, the world continued to prepare. In every corner of Earth, people worked together, trained, and honed their abilities. And yet, Dr. Connors couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was still ahead. As the countdown to the next phase of humanity's future began, she stared out over the city that had been rebuilt, the sky still heavy with uncertainty. She knew that the coming days would be crucial. The galaxy would soon find out whether humanity's victory had been the beginning of a new era, or if it would lead to their downfall. And as the countdown ticked closer to zero, a deep, unsettling truth began to take root in her heart. Whatever happened next, humanity would not just be fighting for survival. They would be fighting for their soul. The time had come. Dr. Elara Connors stood at the edge of humanity's greatest test, the weight of her choices pressing down on her with the intensity of 1,000 stars. The world had healed, rebuilt, and trained for this moment. But the real battle was not with an external enemy, it was within. Humanity's strength had been forged through fire, but now they would be tested in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The galaxy had noticed them. And now, the true consequences of their victory would unfold. The final message had come through days before, shaking the very foundation of Earth's readiness: "We have seen your rise. You have awakened something ancient. Now, it is time to face the reckoning." The Council had spent countless hours trying to decode the ominous transmission, but its meaning was clear: an unstoppable force was on its way. And yet, amid the rising tensions, Dr. Connors felt a strange peace settle over her. The storm was approaching, but this time, humanity was no longer the weak, frightened species it had once been. They had evolved, adapted, and become something greater. But whether it was enough remained to be seen. As the world watched, the sky darkened. The stars seemed to dim, as if the universe itself held its breath. Dr. Connors walked into the central command room, the pulse of humanity's greatest weapon humming through the air. The team was ready. The world's greatest minds, its fiercest warriors, all stood by her side. But despite the preparation, there was still uncertainty in her heart. She looked over the faces of those around her, each person focused, determined, yet sharing the same deep concern. This would be their final stand. "We've unlocked power beyond anything we ever imagined," Dr. Connors said, her voice steady but filled with an unshakable resolve. "Now, we use it not just to protect ourselves, but to show the galaxy who we truly are. We will not let fear dictate our future." The arrival. A sudden tremor shook the ground beneath their feet. The long-awaited invasion had begun. Without warning, a massive shadow blotted out the sun, sending ripples of dread through Earth's population. Thousands of ships appeared in the sky, sleek, imposing, and brimming with energy unlike anything humans had ever encountered. The advanced fleets had arrived. But this time, humanity was not unprepared. As the alien ships hovered ominously above major cities, it was clear that the fate of the Earth was in the hands of those who had unlocked humanity's latent power. There were no more allies to call upon, no more help from the far reaches of the galaxy. This was a battle for the survival of humanity's very soul. The battle began swiftly, with the alien force launching an all-out assault. Energy beams tore through cities, demolishing buildings, creating chaos. Yet, despite the overwhelming power of the enemy, humans did not falter. Their newly developed abilities, honed and tested in the wake of the Voidwalker conflict, flared to life. In the streets, individuals levitated debris to shield themselves, while others wielded destructive energy beams, striking back with the force of a tempest. Dr. Connors watched the battle unfold from the central command, her heart heavy but resolute. The weapons, the powers they had learned to control, were their only hope. Humanity's strength had always been its ability to adapt and endure, and now, it would face its greatest challenge yet. But there was one thing the aliens did not understand: they had underestimated humanity's capacity for unity and resolve. The turning point. As the battle raged on, a revelation sparked within Dr. Connors. It wasn't enough to defend Earth. This fight was not just about saving the planet, it was about showing the galaxy that humanity was not just a pawn to be crushed underfoot. The Draconian fleet's message had been clear: humanity had awoken something ancient. But they did not yet know what the full extent of their awakening meant. Dr. Connors had long suspected there was something more to the power humanity had unlocked, something hidden beneath the surface. She had always believed there was a deeper connection, a universal force that tied humanity together. As the alien forces pushed forward, something incredible happened. The energy humans had been channeling began to coalesce, to merge into a singular force, one far more powerful than anything anyone had ever anticipated. With a single, unified strike, humans harnessed the full extent of their newfound abilities. The energy surged, rippling through the atmosphere, crashing into the alien fleet with such force that the sky itself seemed to shudder. The Draconian ships, once impervious to all forms of attack, began to break apart, their energy shields faltering under the unprecedented power of humanity's attack. The aliens, caught off guard, tried to regroup, but it was too late. In a dazzling display of light and power, the remaining ships were torn apart, their forces scattering in retreat. The aftermath. As the smoke cleared and the wreckage of the alien fleet rained down upon the Earth, humanity stood victorious once again. The world was in ruins, but it was their world now. They had proven something to the galaxy, that they were not to be underestimated. They had faced an unimaginable threat and emerged triumphant, stronger than ever before.